Welcome to Accenture's Insurance News Analysis February 2021 edition. Hello and welcome to Accenture's Insurance News Analysis with me, Natalie De Freitas. I'll be interviewing Accenture's Global Insurance Lead, Kenneth Saldanha, for his views behind the biggest insurance news stories of the month. Kenneth, last week, the World Economic Forum convened for this year's more digital Davos. In a survey from the forum, pandemics and livelihood crises led the rankings of risks expected to pose a critical threat to the world in the next 2 years. Following them were cybersecurity and extreme weather. Insurers are a key part of the global economic recovery. What are on their minds right now as the biggest risks for 2021 and 22? And are they optimistic about the future?
Yeah, Natalie, I would say insurers are absolutely optimistic about the future. Insurance, by its very nature, is an optimistic industry. Otherwise, we wouldn't underwrite the risks we do. But I do think, looking forward, the issues that you're raising are absolutely enormous for insurers, right? We have pandemic and health, big deal. Livelihood, businesses recovering and getting back to normal, another very big deal. And of course, the sustainability and climate issues has very direct bearing as participants in society, but also for the risks that insurers underwrite. So I think across the major topics that are top of mind at the World Economic Forum, insurance is very much a part of that conversation. But I would still say that overall there is an expectation that there will be, in fact, an optimistic recovery tone to what we see coming out of the World Economic Forum, what we see in 21 and 22. And I think, I think you and I have talked in the past about what are our bets for 2021. Certainly one of them has been a strong push on the part of insurers around sustainability, around workforce and diversity. And so I think there are topics that are very much in line with what insurers are looking at and will be high on their own personal agendas as well.
I'd like to pick up on another story. So natural catastrophes have resulted in 97 billion in insured losses in 2020 last year, 40% above the average for the whole century, according to a report from Aon that was published in Reuters. Social distancing requirements added a whole new dynamic in making processes, in making claims processes that little bit more difficult. Insurers have therefore had to collect accident and damage data from devices and drones, with COVID-19 preventing loss assessors to visit a scene in person. Do you expect this trend to continue even after COVID-19?
Absolutely, Natalie. And as you said, this is an exacerbation of something that is, I think, been on insurers' agenda for a while. From an insurer's perspective, one of the most dangerous jobs that insurance adjusters have to do is actually climb onto roofs and look at damage and assess that. That's not something that they do lightly, and they never have done lightly. Now, I think insurers have been doing some very interesting things around this notion of using drones or digital imaging, well in advance of the events of 2020. In fact, I believe in 2019. In Florida, a number of U.S. insurers created a consortium that knowing full well that they were in the midst of hurricane season, they actually took a series of aerial images of the entire Florida geographic area. And what that allowed them to do was essentially have a very clean set of before and after images to say what exactly was the nature of damage to roofs, to flooding, to all of that. To take a look at, and it was all done remotely. It was all done with drone imaging, but it was done with a very clear sense of saying we don't want to do this once the storm has gone through and the logistics of being in those areas are extremely challenging. We'd much rather have the ability to look at this digitally and to do the image verification that way. So I think the industry has been innovating in this area for a while, and certainly as the frequency and magnitude of these catastrophic events continues to climb, that will be certainly a place where we see them, but I think we're going to see them in day-to-day adjusting and day-to-day activities of the insurers as well.
Certainly seems like a win-win. And keeping on the theme of climate change, and Insurers Journal report that European scientists who feed critical climate data to industry and researchers, they say their next breakthrough in weather forecasting will be powered by AI. I wanted to get your take on, are insurers ready to work with AI and the richer data that might come through on climate?
I think that they're already doing it. I don't think it's a question of whether insurers will be ready to work with AI. I think we're seeing that certainly in the climate area, but I think it's endemic to how insurers are operating right now. So to some degree, even the information that's flowing through telematics, through whether it's your driver's cell phone or through a device in the vehicle, that's generating AI pattern recognition for insurers around behavior-based insurance. It's something that in our recent consumer survey is a high demand from consumers to say they want to be rewarded for their behavior. So if they are actually driving at safe speeds without hard braking, without hard curves, they want that to be reflected in their pricing. Well, that's absolutely something that's around AI pattern recognition, data analytics, around telematics. We're seeing the same thing around, can you in fact do things with advance warning on some of these weather and climate predictions that will make a big difference for insurers. So whether it's about, the advance warning to move to safer, higher ground, to board up properties, even when it comes to fires, there's been the work done to say, let's pattern out where we think the likely trajectory of these fires are. And insurers are out in front of them saying, great, we then want to spray fire retardant material on the properties, etc., in this location. So I think this idea of AI driving the ability to look a little bit ahead of the curve and allow insurers to act to mitigate losses as opposed to recover from losses is something that's been happening for a while, and it's going to continue to happen at an increasing pace.
And in keeping with the theme of reduced emissions and climate, COVID-19 certainly took its toll on how much we drove last year and this year too. The Association of British Insurers have reported that the average price paid by motorists for car insurance last year was £465, the lowest level since 2016. What is next for auto insurance? You've mentioned behaviour-based premiums already, but I suppose my question is, should insurers expect anything more than rebates and savings on their insurance?
Well, I do think that the rebates and things that happened last year were essentially a very simple response to usage, right? I think that's a step before you get into behavior-based pricing, which would actually be reflective of the nature of driving that's happening. But I think, Natalie, what we're really seeing with insurance is recognizing that fundamental usage of assets has changed so much. There's a real shift to saying where else should insurers participate, and that's where we see the convergence notion, the idea that consumers have faced an incredible level of uncertainty and risk in 2020. We see that in our data. We see that in what consumers are saying. And so for whether you're an auto insurer or a commercial or property insurer, what I think most carriers are thinking about is how do they actually participate in the partnerships required to bring a broader set of safety or wellness to their consumers. So I don't think we're going to see auto insurance trying to just innovate within the silo of auto insurance. I think it's much more likely that we're going to see them step beyond that narrow arena into the places like wellness, like the connection between health and physical well-being, into wealth management and into those areas. So I think that's where we're headed, is not how do I continue to find different ways to play in my existing sandbox. It's going to be this recognize that the sandbox is forever changed, so let's start looking at a broader sphere.
Really interesting. I'll never look at my car in the same way again.